The Friday events of the crucifixion are well known. There were the trials before the Sanhedrin, Herod the governor, and Pilate. There was the release of Barabbas. There was the humiliating beating of Jesus by the soldiers. Of course, there was the cross. There was the earthquake. There was the centurion's declaration that certainly this was the Son of God. Alan, I think I'm a little hot. I don't want to kill anybody. The Sunday events of the Easter story are well known too. They are the basis of our faith. The women discover the empty tomb. They're greeted by Jesus in the garden. John and Peter race and find that the tomb is empty. And they are asked the question, why do you search for the living among the dead? So we know the Friday events really well, and we know the Sunday events really well, but what do we know about the Saturday events? Not so much. The Bible, for the most part, is silent on Saturday, except for the fact that we're told that guards were posted at the tomb. Some churches call Saturday Easter Eve. Others call it the Great Sabbath because that's when Jesus rested. Some call it Black Saturday, and some churches that have an altar will even put a black cloth over the altar on Saturday. Some of you may have come from churches like that. Last week we talked about Friday and who's really in charge, and I mentioned that the material that I'm using is from John Ortberg's book, Who is This Man? He presents a different approach than I've seen from anybody else. So today we're going to talk about Saturday, and for those first disciples on Saturday, Saturday is the day that they realize they have to go on. They gather and they remember just like we do after a funeral, and you've done that many times here in the old fellowship hall right up there. They reminisce. What if? What could have been? Do you remember? We were going to change the world. What happened? When did the wheels fall off the bus? They talked about what happened. They talked about the fact that Jesus had failed. He couldn't get enough followers. He couldn't get the power players to play. He couldn't get the ordinary people on board. He couldn't even get his closest followers to stick with him in his darkest moments. Jesus Christ failed. On Saturday, as far as his followers were concerned. I think sometimes we forget how difficult Saturday just had to be, how excruciating Saturday was for those guys. Saturday is the day that your dreams died. So let me ask you a question. Have you ever had a Saturday? Why is there even a Saturday? Why didn't God just skip it and get on with the Resurrection Sunday? Why did he even need Saturday? I like what Ortberg says. In its own way, perhaps Saturday should mark the world as much as Friday and Sunday. 3-day stories are all over the Bible. 1 Corinthians chapter 15, the Apostle Paul says, "For I delivered to you as of first importance what I also received, that Christ died for our sins in accordance with the Scriptures, that he was buried, that he was raised on the third day." In accordance with the Scriptures. But 3-day stories are everywhere. Abraham finds the ram that spares Isaac's life. He found it on what day? Third day. Joseph's brothers were released from prison on the third day. The spies hidden by Rahab were safe on the third day. Esther was favorably received by the king. Third day. Hosea chapter 6, come, let us return to the Lord, for he has torn us that he may heal us. He has struck us down, and he will bind us up. After 2 days, he will revive us, and on the third day, he will raise us up that we may live before him. All those events share the same structure. The first day is a day of trouble. The third day is the day of deliverance. But the second day, Saturday, is the day of the continuation of trouble. And the problem with third day stories is you don't know it's a third day story until the third day. When it's a Friday, when it's a Saturday, as far as you know, deliverance is never going to come. It may be just a one-day story for you, and that one day of trouble may last the rest of your life. Some of you know what I'm talking about. This is the story of the human race. Think about it. Think about the big picture. Genesis chapter 3, we are separated from the tree of life. That's the fall. That's Friday. Revelation chapter 22, totally at the other end of the Bible. We have access to the tree of life. That's restoration. That's Sunday. But now we're living between the trees, Rob Bell calls it. We're living between the garden, where everything went off track, and the new garden, where everything comes back together. And so we are living between the trees on Saturday as followers of Jesus on this broken planet. Saturday is the day that silence happens, which can be really frustrating. After the agony of Friday, God goes silent. The door slams in your face, and you cry out to him. And all you hear are crickets. Saturday is the day of loss. It's the day your spouse walks away. You never saw that coming. It's the day your mom and dad sit you down and say, son, we can't get along anymore. We're getting divorced. That was my story when I was 12 years old. They thought it was best for the kids. Me and my siblings are all so screwed up. I wish they could have worked it out. Saturday is the day that the doctor gives you the diagnosis that you were really hoping not to hear. Saturday is the day that your best friend puts a knife in your back. Saturday is the day your adoption agency closes its doors, taking all your money and leaving you heartbroken and childless and grieving. Saturday is the day the police knock on your door in the middle of the night to tell you that your child or your spouse has been killed. It's the day you lose your job, and you never saw that coming. It's the day the judge awards custody of your kids to your spouse who only wants them so that he can hurt you. And some of you have been through nasty custody battles. It's the day you lose your house. It's the day you lose your land. It's the day you lose your business. It's the day your dreams die. And it didn't just happen to the followers of Jesus 2,000 years ago. It can happen to you and to me today. And we've all had them. Some of you right now are thinking back to a very specific day, aren't you? Some of you know the date. And you dread when the calendar rolls around and gets close, because the pain is just unbearable. Now, there are 3 responses to Saturday. The first is despair. You can give up on God altogether. Many people do. There's never going to be a Sunday, you decide, ever. I was talking with Mike Burns this week, and we talked about a new group of believers that the church has to deal with. They have abandoned church because of hurt, because of disillusionment, not with God, but with church people. Do you know there's a whole new category of people, hundreds of thousands and probably millions of people who love God, but they can't take His church because it's petty and unkind and mean. And they just walk away saying, I don't need that. It's called the Duns. And so now there are churches that are beginning outreach to Christians who have been scarred by the church, but they have, in despair, walked away. Another response is denial. We're all pretty good at this, I think. We pretend everything's fine. We paste on the smiley face and how you doing? Oh, I'm doing fine, brother. The Lord is good. Inside, I'm not even sure the Lord is even there. Because I don't know how He could have let this happen. If there's a loving God, man, He's got some splaining to do, Lucy. But we can't share that because that's a doubt, and we're supposed to be strong. And then the third response to Saturday is you can wait. And that's hard because you're not doing anything, and we want to do something. We're wired that way. Sometimes the most God-honoring thing you can do is just wait. I wish I could give you a prescription and a to-do list. But some of you are at a place in your life where your job is just to wait. Many Bible characters were experts at waiting, which I find encouraging. Abraham waited a lifetime for his son. Zechariah and Elizabeth, same thing with John the Baptist. Moses, clearly called by God and set apart for a holy purpose, 40 years chasing dust bunnies in the backside of the desert. What a waste. And when he did try to take matters into his own hands, he completely messed it up, which is what we all usually do. Waiting is hard because we're wired to perform, to achieve, to do something. And sometimes God says, no, your job, wait. Paul, incredible conversion to Christ, wanted to get out there and take on the world. He ends up spending a couple years in virtual isolation, waiting. All these and more, they engaged in what is called the holy act of waiting. Some even believe that God had given up on them. Abraham did. He's called the father of the faithful. I get that, but he kind of took matters into his own hands, and we're still reaping the results of that stupid decision. Maybe that's where you are right now. Maybe you think God has given up on you. It's natural. But today I want to encourage you to look at your Saturday as a holy act of waiting. I want to see you're doing nothing but waiting on God as an act of worship to God. On March the 23rd, 2002, I remember hearing the devastating news of Rodney Pulliam. He was a lawyer and a minister in Frederick, Maryland. He was taking his sons to a barber shop. He was sitting in a red light on Butterfly Lane in Frederick, Maryland, a very narrow, over-traveled road. The driver behind him suffered an epileptic seizure and plowed his car into the back and killed Dad and 3 sons like that. For several years, I had to drive by that spot every morning, several times, and every afternoon, several times. I drove a school bus. And every time I drove by and saw the fading memorials on the tree, the crosses and the teddy bears and the toys that were getting older and wetter and decaying over the months and the years. every time I drove by, my heart just ached for Tammy, the widow. How do you recover from something like that? He was a pastor. As a matter of fact, the church he was a pastor at was a black church there in Frederick. I think it was a Missionary Baptist Church or something. And it was literally within 100 yards of the site of the accident. Right on the corner. There was the church, a house, and then the road. And he could have hit the church with a baseball. I have followed Tammy over the years. She went to seminary. And now she's in a pastoral position. I know our churches don't buy that, but she is ministering the grace of God and the pain that she has experienced and the healing to other people. She could have just ran away from God. She could have said, I can't love a God that could kill my whole family. It's your fault. Instead, she's waiting. She has chosen to wait. She offers no explanation. She doesn't even try to figure it out. You can't. There is no explanation. She's just waiting. Do you know what the most common psalm is? The Bible is such a complex library of various types of literature, and the Psalms is probably the greatest expression of all those various types. But the most common type of psalm in the literature in the Psalms is the complaint psalm. People often say, well, how do I pray? And I say, go to the Psalms, and you just pray them out loud in your prayer closet, and just pray it like you think they were written, and as your heart is. There's a lot of nasty stuff in the Psalms. And I love it because it's honest. A complaint psalm says, God, where are you? You're like, you can't talk to God like that. No. You got to be like Mephibosheth and just bow down and be all good. Oh, no, you don't. God wants authenticity. He wants us to be real. For example, take a look at Psalm 73. The writer says, living for God has been a waste of time. Life has only gotten worse since I started trying to live for you. I love it. Because there have been times when I have given my all for the kingdom of God and gotten royally screwed over by people. There have been times I want to walk out and quit and say, it's not worth it. It's supposed to be easier. And I read the Psalms and go, ooh. Well, 3,000 years ago, look at. The more things stay the same, I'm in good company. I love reading those Psalms. They keep me in ministry. Next February, Valentine's Day, 25 of your fellow islanders, hopefully including some of you, are going to go to Haiti. Let me tell you, Haitians know about Saturday. It's the only slave nation in the world to revolt and create their own country. Back in 1804, they had so much hope. They had such a bright future. Like Jesus and the disciples on Thursday, they thought that the world was their oyster and they were going to just have success and finally win. But then Friday happened, and now in Haiti, guess what? It's Saturday, and it's Saturday every stinking day. They went through bloody dictators and corrupt officials and grinding poverty and international economic rape, and they go through hurricanes, and they went through a devastating earthquake 6 years ago, and now they're going through cholera and rigged elections. There's nothing but Saturday in Haiti, and there's no hope in sight. The entire nation has learned the holy act of waiting. And when you land in Port-au-Prince, it's palpable, it's tangible. You feel the despair. And you cry out with the psalmist, God, where are you? Kara Tippett knew what it was like to live on Saturday, a beautiful mother of 4. You may have heard the story a year and a half ago. She was a church planter's wife in Colorado. She passed away a year ago, March 22nd, from cancer. In October of the previous year, she had written a book about her Saturday sojourn. It was called The Hardest Peace, Expecting Grace in the Midst of Life's Hard. For those of you who are living in Saturday, I highly recommend that book. During her struggle, she became aware of another cancer victim, 29-year-old Brittany Maynard, who made national news when she announced that she had scheduled her death by doctor-assisted suicide on November 1. So Kara wrote her a heartfelt plea to reconsider that move. And in her letter, she wrote these words. She said, "Suffering is not the absence of goodness. It is not the absence of beauty, but perhaps it can be the place where true beauty can be known." And I would change that for today's purpose to read, "Saturday is not the absence of goodness. It is not the absence of beauty, but perhaps it can be the place where true beauty can be known." Even though you don't feel very beautiful right now. Sadly, Brittany Maynard could not accept that truth, and she eventually did indeed choose to end her life. What I'm saying as we consider 3 days that rocked the world is this. If you find yourself living in Saturday, it's okay. It's normal. God's not up there angry at you because you're human. The deafening silence of God, the disappointment that you have with God, your broken heart, all of this combined with your holy act of waiting are the raw materials from which He will create something beautiful. Do you believe that? Psalm 130, "I wait for the Lord, my soul waits, and in His word I hope. My soul waits for the Lord more than watchmen for the morning, more than watchmen for the morning." A couple years ago, we hiked a couple miles up a mountain river in Larigal, Haiti. Went up there, and I actually got to preach at a small church at the top of the mountain. The creek bed had eroded away, and there was a trunk of a tree that was suspended in midair. And the only thing keeping it there was this tangle of roots. And at one point, that tree was on solid ground. But when the rainy season comes and the river comes down, it just washes away. And I called that the Saturday tree, because just hanging on. As soon as I saw that, I was drawn to it. I actually started to cry as I looked at that and as I took the picture. I thought, man, there's been times in my life, that is me, and this is you. This is some of you. For some of you, that's your life right now, baby. You're just barely hanging on. But Sunday's coming. Sunday's coming. It's Saturday. Turn to your neighbor and tell him, Sunday's coming. I know you don't like to talk back, but do it. Can I get real for a minute? I won't do it much, I promise, but I think ministers ought to be fake. Thursday was a rough day for me. I had a conversation that filled me with grief. And poor Neil came into my office, asked the stupid question, "How you doing?" I can't fake my emotions real well. I'm very transparent, and if I'm in the dumps, man, you're going to know it. I just look like I'm in the dumps. And I said, I can't talk about it. And he graciously left me alone, but I felt bad. So I leave the church later that night and stopping at Sobeys. My wife is gone. She probably won't be back till after Easter. I'm tired of eating at Taco Boys. So I'm going to find some food. I found some great chicken wings, by the way. They were fantastic. Found a couple other items, and I go to the checkout counter, and it's Alicia. I always read the name tag, so I like to talk to the people that check me out, and my servers and things like that. It's Alicia. And I'm walking up there, and I'm thinking, she's going to ask me a question. I know she's going to, because it's what we do. It's how we are polite in our society. She's going to say, "How are you doing tonight?" And I'm thinking, don't ask that question. I'm too raw. I'm too wounded. Don't. And I thought, okay, if she asks me, I'm telling her. I'm going to teach her a thing or two. She says, "So how are you?" And I looked at her, I said, "Not so good, Alicia." I said, "I got some bad news today, and I'm just very sad. As a matter of fact, I'm walking around your store, and I feel like I want to cry. And I might start crying right here." And her eyes got big, and she's like, "I'm sorry to hear that." And she meant it, I could tell. And then I thought, let's redeem this. Instead of just walking around in my pity party, which I love to do, I said, "But you know, Alicia, it's kind of like that whole Easter story." I said, they killed Jesus on Friday, and his disciples, they just thought everything was done for, and they didn't know where they were going to go on with their lives, and they didn't have a clue what the future held. I said, but then Sunday came, and it all got good again. I said, and you know what? Sunday's coming for me. I know it's coming for me. I know I'm not going to stay here. And she was so sweet. She said, I've never heard about Easter like that before. No one's ever said that to me. And then she said, I really hope Sunday comes for you. That's my hope for you. That's my prayer for you, whatever your Saturday is. Sunday's coming. And you got some choices to make. You can give up on God. You can pretend that everything's fine when it's not. Or you can wait. You can wait.